Hey friends, welcome back to the channel and to Book Club, the ongoing series where we distill and discuss highlights and summaries from some of my favorite books. And today we're going to be talking about procrastination. So I'm going to be sharing 5 of my top insights from this book, Solving the Procrastination Puzzle by Professor Tim Pychyl, who is a world-leading professor of psychology at Carleton University. I think he's retired now actually, but he spent basically his entire life studying the field of procrastination. But this is a very small, very accessible book that basically summarizes his 4 decades worth of insight in the field of procrastination into a very short, very readable book. So let's start by talking about that procrastination is actually a way bigger problem than we give it credit for. Like, there are a lot of people that identify as being procrastinators. Oh lol, I'm such a procrastinator. Lol, look at me, I like to leave things to the last minute. And we think that it's not a big deal. We think that, oh, who cares? I'm just the sort of person who likes working to deadlines, or like, I enjoy working under pressure. But in this book, Tim Pychyl cites a bunch of evidence that suggests that actually procrastination bleeds into all other areas of our life as well. It's not just that you suck at delivering a essay or homework assignment on time for the deadline. It's that if you don't solve this procrastination problem, you are literally wasting your entire life away. So firstly, there's some pretty strong evidence that people who procrastinators tend to have worse health than people that don't. And this is for 2 main reasons. The first one is that procrastination causes stress. And this comes from Professor Fushia Surwa, who I also did an interview with on my podcast Deep Dive. You can find that on all podcast platforms. But essentially, procrastination tends to cause large amounts of stress. We've all felt that stress just before a deadline. We've all felt the stress of like, oh, I'm putting this thing off and I feel more stressed the more I put this thing off. Stress is generally very bad for us. It's bad for our physiology, it's bad for our bodies, it's bad for our immune system. And secondly, people who procrastinate tend to also procrastinate from health promoting behaviors. The sort of person who procrastinates from handing in an essay on time at university is also probably the sort of person who procrastinates from exercise or from healthy eating or from going to the doctor when there's a problem. And then reason number 2 why procrastination is actually a way bigger problem than we think it is the idea of regret. So when someone close to us dies, for example, there tend to be 2 sorts of regrets that we experience. There are regrets of omission and regrets of commission. Now, regrets of commission are doing the wrong thing, and regrets of omission are not doing the thing at all. Now, it turns out that when someone close to us dies, the regrets that we tend to experience more of are the regrets of omission, the things that we didn't get a chance to do. And apparently, the regrets of omission that relate to our own procrastination are the most troubling in the grieving process when it comes to grieving for a loved one. If we have procrastinated from doing something that we know we would have wanted to do or they would have wanted us to do, and we did not do the thing because of procrastination, that feels really, really bad when we lose someone close to us. And thirdly, procrastination is a big deal because procrastination literally sabotages our happiness. And we've got a bunch of psychologists and philosophers who basically agree that happiness and fulfillment is often found in the pursuit of self-directed goals. And so when you procrastinate from, in particular, self-directed goals, then you're literally sabotaging your own happiness. So I found those points pretty interesting because it made me realize that actually procrastination is a bigger deal than I was thinking it was. And now whenever I find myself procrastinating, I remind myself, hang on, I do not want to be a procrastinator here, because actually this is not just affecting this situation at hand, like filing my tax return or whatever the thing might be. This is actually going to bleed into the other areas of my life as well. Oh, and by the way, if you're vibing with this video so far, you might like to check out the interview that I've actually done with Tim Pychyl on my podcast Deep Dive. You can find that on its YouTube channel and in all mainstream podcast platforms as well. All right, insight number 2 from the book, and which is sort of the main thesis of the book and the main thesis of Tim Pychyl's and Professor Fushia Surwa's work, is that procrastination is fundamentally an emotional issue. Because usually the reason why we procrastinate from things is because there's some sort of emotional blocker that's gotten in our way. There's some sort of internal resistance to the idea of doing the task, and underneath that resistance, there's always some kind of negative emotion. In my experience, that negative emotion almost always tends to be fear of some sort. But you might say fear and doubt, but I would say doubt is sort of a subset of fear, because when you have doubt, you have fear that you're not good enough to do the thing. And so the way that I think about this is that when I'm procrastinating from something, what is my underlying fear? Like, is it a fear of what other people will think of me? Is it a fear of not being good enough? Is it a fear of failure? Is it a fear of success? Is it a fear of boredom? And so there's some sort of negative emotion which causes me to feel bad about starting the task, and therefore I give in to feeling good. And when we give in to feeling good, that is what fuels the cycle of procrastination. And so with that in mind, if we understand that generally 95% of the time there is an emotional blocker to our procrastination, it means we can start taking steps to overcome that. And the first step is to name the fear. Personally, the thing I find most helpful here is just journaling. If I'm procrastinating for something for a very long time, I will either just think in my mind, like, what's the fear here, and try and name it to be like, what am I actually scared of? Or I will just open up Day One, the journaling app that I use, and just start journaling about it, or use a pen and paper, depending on whatever I've got to hand. And usually I'll find that, okay, I'm feeling this sense of aversion, this emotional aversion to doing this task. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm worried about da-da-da. Now, getting over our fears and like overcoming fears and acting in the face of fear is a lifelong endeavor. But generally what I find, and what the research suggests as well, is that when you name that fear, when you bring it out into the light, it reduces the power that it has over us. If incidentally you're interested in learning more about this, then actually chapters 4, 5, and 6 of my upcoming book, Feel Good Productivity, are all about how to beat procrastination. And chapter 5 in particular deals with fear. It's all about the principles and strategies that we can use to overcome fear and the emotional blockers that cause us to procrastinate. And so if you're interested in checking the book out, you can go to feelgoodproductivity.com, and if you pre-order it before the book is released, you get a free $300 worth of bonuses. So yeah, feelgoodproductivity.com, also linked down below. All right, insight number 3 is that motivation is not a prerequisite for action. So motivation is this idea that we need to feel like doing something before we do the thing. And you often hear people say, oh, I don't feel motivated enough to do X. But what Tim Pychyl says in the book, and which I totally agree with, and I have been preaching to whoever will listen for a very long time, is that you do not need to feel motivated in order to act. Back when I had a job, I didn't feel like going to work quite a lot of the time. It'd get to a Monday morning and I'd be like, oh, I really don't feel like going to work. But just because I don't feel like going to work doesn't mean I'm not going to work. Motivation is not a prerequisite for action. This, incidentally, is something that Jeff Hayden elaborates on in this very good book, The Motivation Myth, which I have a book club episode about, linked up there or over there somewhere. And if you can really internalize this idea that you do not, in fact, need to be motivated in order to act, that one firmware update in your mind will completely and utterly change your life. Because there are so many instances in all of our lives where we allow that feeling, like I don't feel like it, stopping us from doing something that's genuinely going to help us build a life that we love. And one of the strategies I find particularly helpful for this is to really lean into identity. And that's something that Tim Pychyl agrees with the procrastination stuff as well. When you have the identity of someone who's a procrastinator, or when you have the identity of someone who doesn't get stuff done, it's way easier to allow this feeling of like, oh, I don't feel like doing it, from stopping us from actually doing the thing. Whereas if you adopt the identity of a professional,
this Granger's done it.
You know, when I was working as a doctor, I am a doctor, therefore I go to work and do doctor stuff. It's like, it's not a choice. I don't have to feel like it to do the thing. I am a healthy person, therefore I go to the gym. I am a good husband, therefore I spend time with my wife and kids. You know, it's like the identity leads to the behavior. And so a good question to ask ourselves is, to what extent are we allowing an identity label to prevent us from doing the thing and to cause us to procrastinate? Like when I was first writing my book, when I was first writing this about 3 years ago, I really struggled with imposter syndrome because I did not have the identity of being a writer. Similarly, when I started my YouTube channel, I did not actually embrace the identity of being a YouTuber. Whereas now I fully embraced, well, somewhat embraced the identity of being a writer and also fully embraced the identity of being a YouTuber. And therefore, I do writing and I film videos, whether or not I feel like it, because I'm approaching it like a professional. So again, the question I would ask you is that if you're struggling with procrastination in a given area, what would change if you decided to approach it like a professional would, rather than like an amateur would? An amateur acts when they feel like it, a professional acts regardless of how they feel. All right, insight number 4 from the book is that if we want to reduce our risks of procrastination, we want to try and strengthen the goal intention. And this speaks to the idea that if we have a strong reason for why we are doing a particular thing, and in particular, if it is a self-directed goal, if the goal is actually something that we personally intrinsically want and value, rather than something that's been foisted upon us by the demands of society, then that is a strong goal intention, and that makes it less likely that we're going to procrastinate from the thing. Whereas if the goal intention is weak, or if we feel some level of controlled motivation for that particular goal, like if it's a goal that we're doing because we want a particular reward, or because we want to avoid a particular punishment, or because we're going to feel shame if we don't achieve the goal, or, you know, all of those other negative reasons for doing a thing, it becomes way easier to procrastinate on that kind of stuff. And so for goals that are self-directed, try and ask yourself, how can I strengthen the intention behind the goal? When my brother, for example, was studying for his exams to get into university, he was struggling to motivate himself to do the thing because it's like, oh, you know, maths exams are boring, etc., etc. But what he did was that he changed his computer desktop wallpaper to a photograph of Oxford University, and he saw that every time he went on the computer. And that strengthened his goal intention because he was like, I do not enjoy this maths work right now, but that is the goal that I want. It's a goal I intrinsically want for myself. I'm looking at the photograph on my desktop wallpaper, therefore I'm less likely to procrastinate on that particular thing. In my case, the way I strengthen my goal intentions to go to the gym is I enjoy watching superhero movies because they're usually pretty ripped, and after I watch like a Marvel film, it'll give me some inspiration to go to the gym a little bit more. But also, I had a phase a few years ago where I unfollowed a bunch of the pretty girls on my Instagram and instead followed a bunch of dudes with like ripped six-pack abs. So now when I scroll through my Instagram feed, it's either friends, or it's dudes with six-pack abs, or it's desk setups. And those are like the 3 kind of categories of content that I consume on Instagram. And seeing dudes with six-pack abs, it's gonna sound weird, but it strengthens my goal intention to take the gym a little bit more seriously. Your mileage may vary, try whatever works for you, but if you can try and strengthen a goal intention behind the thing that you're trying to do, generally it reduces the effects of procrastination. And then insight number 5 is that a surprisingly effective tool for beating procrastination is what's called implementation intentions. Again, I write about these in this book as well, link down below if you want to check it out. And basically an implementation intention is if X happens, then I will do Y. So for example, as a way for me to drink more water, I have an implementation intention of when I make myself a cup of coffee, I will drink water while the coffee is brewing. Similarly, I also have another implementation intention attached to making a cup of coffee, which is while the coffee is brewing, then I will do some mobility exercises with like the kitchen towel that's in the kitchen because my mobility for my shoulders is really bad, and it's a way of helping me stay more mobile and attach the habit or the action that I want to something else that I'm doing. In Atomic Habits, James Clear has another word for it. He calls this habit stacking. Like if you stack different habits on top of each other, implementation intentions, it's all the same general idea. If X happens, then I will do Y. Now, when it comes to procrastination, you can apply these implementation intentions to whatever you're struggling with, and generally it will make it easier to start doing the thing. So for example, one thing I procrastinate from a lot is to clean my room and tidy my room because it's just annoying and I don't like doing it. And so the implementation intention I have is that just before going to bed, A, I will listen to some kind of podcast on my AirPods, and B, I will just spend 5 minutes tidying my room a little bit. Now, I still procrastinate from tidying my room quite a lot, but 50% of the time, the fact that I have that implementation intention in my mind means that I actually spend 5 minutes tidying my room, and then it just looks a little bit nicer. The other big way of using implementation intentions is time-based implementation intentions, which is just a fancy way of saying, put the thing on the calendar. So for example, these days, every morning, the implementation intention I have is, I often find myself procrastinating from filming videos, but my implementation intention is, every morning, the first thing that I'm going to do after breakfast is to make myself a cup of coffee, to play a song on the guitar to warm myself up, and then to film a video. It's like I do those 3 things: coffee, guitar, film a video. In fact, just before filming this one, I was singing In the Blood by John Mayer, absolute banger of a tune. Similarly, an implementation intention is that if it gets to 5 p.m., I will stop work and I will go to the gym. Whatever the thing might be, it's basically time blocking, but there's so much evidence behind it from Professor Goldwitzer and like literally hundreds of studies that have shown that when you set an implementation intention and you're specific about what is the if that's going to lead to the response, then that makes it way less likely that you're going to procrastinate from it. And again, if you're interested in reading more, you can find out more in my book where I talk about more about this and specifically how to apply it to your life as well. Now, if you're interested in more details about how to specifically apply implementation intentions to manage your time and to be more productive, then you might like to check out my completely free productivity classes over on Skillshare, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. If you've been living under a rock, then you might not have heard of Skillshare. They're a fantastic online platform with classes on all sorts of topics from interior design and cooking to productivity and lifestyle design and coding and AI and careers and almost anything you can think of. There is a fantastic class on Skillshare for the thing. I've personally been teaching on Skillshare since 2019, so I've got about a dozen classes on Skillshare, all of which you can access completely for free with the Skillshare free trial. So if you happen to be one of the first 1,000 people to hit the link in the video description, then that will let you sign up to a completely free trial of Skillshare. And during that trial, you can check out any of my classes. I have 3 that are specifically about productivity and 2 that are specifically about how to study more effectively for exams. So if you're a student and you haven't seen those, you might like to check those out. I can basically guarantee that if you watch those classes and implement what you've learned, you will pretty much double your productivity and probably increase your effectiveness as a student as well. There's also a really good Skillshare original that they've recently published called Make AI Work for You, Break Creative Block by Smitesh Mistry. And that's all about how to use AI to overcome creative block and gain inspiration. And AI is something that I've been using quite a lot in my life to help overcome writer's block as well. So if you're interested in checking any of those out, then click on the link in the video description and that will let you sign up to a completely free trial of Skillshare. And thank you so much, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. And if you're interested in more specifically how I personally use implementation intentions to manage my time and be more productive, then check out this video over here. It's all about the Trident method, which is a 3-part method that I personally use for staying organized, for managing my time, and for being more productive. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you hopefully in the next video. Bye-bye.